Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Ronnie Nian tuku whenua, no mai haere mai ki te zui, me mahi tātou mō te oranga o te katoa. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar. What I'm going to be doing is going through the process of submitting your RS7. So welcome along. The whakatauki today is that we should work together for the well-being of everyone, and especially around at this point in time where it's pertinent information that you're sending through to the ministry. It's about your funding, it's your numbers, your funded child hours, your staff hour count and everything like that. So what I'm going to do is take you through the process of submitting your RS7. Today, we're going to break it down into two. Step one will be the simple submission of your RS7, going through the process of the checks and balances and everything like that. Once I've been through the process of submitting the RS7, we're going to unpack the environment of this current funding period to do with the EC12s and EC13s, to do with discretionary hours and things like that. So the reason I'm breaking it down into two is so for those that are simply just wanting to do a couple of checks and balances and everything like that before they submit their RS7, and then for those clients that just need a little bit more awhina to understand the ministry publications and things like that. Like with any webinar that we run, please feel free to disconnect when you've got all of the information that you need. And also I'll answer any questions at the end of the webinar. So thank you again, everybody, for joining me today. And great, let's get started. So just going to turn my video off and here we go. So when we're submitting our RS7 to the ministry, we're providing them with funded child hours and the staff hour count for the period. So to go through the process, all we need to do is come to reports, come down to MOE reports, and come down to RS7 return funding. Now, before you submit it, you need to ensure that the following has been done. So you've got your holidays in your centre calendar for the previous 5 months and the 4 months following, because this is what manages your advanced funding. So how many days you're going to be operating for that funding, for the coming funding period. You've got child daily sign-in sheets created for each day. So for home-based, it's your homes, etc. And you need to have your children's actual attendances, etc. marked. For non-home-based services, you need staff timesheets created for each day within the funding period, because this is what makes up your staff hour count. You also need to make sure that you've reviewed and actioned your frequent absence report for that period. So just a reminder, month 1 was June. So June was reset to month 1, month 2 is July, month 3 is August, and month 4 is September. So you do have the potential to have children who have lost funding due to the frequent absence rules, either in August if you didn't reconfirm the enrolment, or September for that being the 4th month. The ministry have published too that they will be resetting the frequent absence rules to month 1 from October, which we are working on our software to do that for you. Great, so you need to make sure that you've done all of these things. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at the funding date for November 2022, because that is the date of the payment. What we highly recommend is that you first check your funding hours report. So just make sure you've got funding hours November 2022 and click print. So what we've got here is it does come up with a message if you're missing any information. And here's where you've got the opportunity to review your funding hours report. Now, one of the things you're checking too is you're checking your total amount of hours that's being claimed as well. So you cannot exceed your licence. So for example, if we have a look at the licence of this service in our demo centre, we've got a maximum licence of 50. So 50 children by 6 hours a day is 300. So we need to make sure that when you are doing your checking of your funding hours report, that you have no days that are over 300 in one particular day, for example. Cells highlighted in orange indicate missing information. So of course, in our demo, we have made an example of where there is information missing, and this is where our issue is here. So we've got an emergency closure. So this was the Queen's Remembrance, where if you observed that public holiday, the Ministry advised you to put EC into your centre calendar, and for the funded child hours to come through to your report, you need to have a child daily sign-in sheet for that day with all children marked absent. So let's just quickly skip to our sign-in sheet, and I'm just going to go previous week, and I'm going to quickly create week. And of course, because I've enabled Eli, we haven't actually got all of the numbers there, so I apologise, but you just need to make sure that you've got all children marked as absent. Actually, this little issue that we've come across is good learning too, because when we're thinking about funding for an emergency closure day, you can only claim funding for those that are permanently enrolled. So casually funded children can't get funding on an emergency closure day. Perfect. So coming back to our reports, our MOE reports and our RS7 return, when we have a look at our print, we have still got the missing information. Like I said, we're on our demo site, so because the children don't have any SIM numbers, we've got no funded child hours there. For me, we're just going to proceed with submitting the RS7. Perfect. Once you've done your funded hours checks, you've got sign-in sheets, you've reviewed your frequent absence reports, you come through to submit the RS7 to the MOE. First screen gives you the information about the RS7 report that you're submitting. Also tells you that it needs to be submitted by 6 p.m. on the due date. You can submit it electronically during this period, but that if you submit it on the 31st of December, for example, you're not going to meet the 1 November deadline. When we click continue, this just gives us our funded child hours. And once again, it's coming up telling me that I don't have any funded child hours for my emergency closure. And that's because that is our casually funded child that's absent there. And because I've accepted Eli, and in this test site, they don't have any SIN numbers assigned. That's why they're not on the actual sign-in sheet. Close that message. Great, so this is the highlight saying that there's no child hours. What you'll notice too is underneath your funded child hours and your staff hour count is your discretionary hours table. So if you used discretionary hours during that funding period, this is how it's sent to the ministry. There's no separate form that you need to do. You've also got down here the days of advanced funding. So these are the number of days that you're going to be operating in the coming months, which forms the advanced funding. So that's why you need to make sure your centre calendar is correct. Now, when we click continue, we're taken through to the attestation for certified teacher salaries. Slightly different for this year. Typically, this is an attestation of what you have been paying your staff during that funding period. This year, which was a little bit of an oversight, it's kind of what you were paying as well as what you will be paying. Now, if you need any help for what specifically you're selecting for your service, you'd be reaching out to the MOE. Quite simply, if you select no steps, it means that you are not meeting the funding conditions in relation to salary scale. So your funding would be at the 0 to 25% funding band. Step 1 is where you are meeting the payment as per the funding conditions, and this is where your funding would be washed up and advanced at the base funding rates. By answering step 1 to 6, this is where you have been paying at pay parity, and you will be paying at pay parity for the coming months. Step 11 is where you're opting in for the extended pay parity. So this is where typically your attestation was what you had paid for the previous funding period, but as we know, steps above step 6, you may not have paid them prior to that funding period, but this is where you're opting in for the extended pay parity. So now you need to select what is appropriate for your service. And when you make the selection, of course, it just brings down that sentence. So by selecting step 1, I'm saying that I've been paying my employees at the base rates. And so my funding will be at the base rate for the wash up and for the advanced funding. Now we just simply need to click continue. So now this is where you are attesting as a service provider, the person authorised by the service to make this declaration. You certify to the best of your knowledge, I understand that, if I've made a false statement or etc. So you're reading through what you're signing here. Populating your name, your contact phone number, and your designation. So once you've reviewed the information, you're populating these fields. Are you ready to submit your RS7? You click yes to continue. We often have questions, how do I know if my RS7 has actually been submitted? The Ministry have published to say that they will send you an email within a couple of business days to say that they have received your RS7, but you can also too select to come to Utility, come to File Download. Now, what you'll find in here down the bottom is that you'll have the RS7 Return for November 2022. It's not showing in my list, and that is because we are in the demonstration site, but it is in here that you would see RS7 Return to and your license number, and you'd see November 2022. I apologise for the little hiccups we've had while we've been in the demo site. This is just to give you a bit of a feel for how to submit your RS7. So if you've got everything you need out of the webinar and how to submit your RS7, please feel free to disconnect at any time. Please stay online if you'd like to learn more about the funding settings for the period 1 June 2022 to the 30th of September 2022. So in light of COVID times, etc., I'm just going to come to our home screen. In light of the COVID times, etc., we've had some things coming up across our notice board here. So for example, for the 26th of September, if you chose to observe that as a public holiday, in your centre calendar, you needed to select emergency closure, and you needed to have a sign-in sheet with all of your children marked absent. The reason for that is because you need your funded child hours on your RS7 for that day so that you can be paid the funding. That's about our RS7 webinar. Okay, so when we think about the EC12, EC13 changes to the ministry, this information that's here is available in the old look and the new look. The difference is that in the old look, you need to keep refreshing your notice board to get the different things that are available there. So I'm just going to stay in the new look because it's easier for me to navigate. Now, if we come to the ministry's funding here, Pānui. Let's come to our Pānui. Right, and let's come down to browse all issues. Now, back on the 12th of May, from memory, yes. So back from the 12th of May, the ministry have advised that we can have the ministry advised that in light of the EC12, in light of the COVID times and illnesses, the ministry came out at the 12th of May to say that a parent, a primary caregiver, can complete an EC13 form in lieu of a medical practitioner. So with an EC13 and EC12, what you can do is exempt a child from the absence rules, which is our 3-week rule, and our frequent absence rules for the period of time that it applies for that child. Now, InfoCare can give you a report of when children were absent, who's broken the absence rules, all of those sorts of things, but InfoCare can't tell you when the child was absent due to these reasons. So what it would be is conversations with your families, with your primary caregivers about when that child was away, was it due to one of these 4 criteria? If their absence for that period was for those reasons, the parent or primary caregiver can complete an EC13 form coupled with an EC12, and then what you can do is exempt the child from the absence rules for that period. It's not about waiting until they've broken a rule. It's ongoing kōrero, it's ongoing conversations with the family. So if they rang you in June and said, oh, my child's going to be absent for the next week, it would be, was it due to one of these reasons? If it was, you would apply the exemption for that period in June. That does have the potential to secure your funding due to absence. So if the child's absence during June was for one of these reasons, and you applied the EC12, EC13, it could be that June was not month one for the frequent absence. So if the exemption was enough to trip the frequent absence rule, it just means that July would subsequently be month one, August month two, September month three. So this EC12, EC13 exemption applied for the whole funding period. So like I said, there's reports in InfoCare to tell you when absence rules have been broken, but InfoCare can't tell you if it was due to that reason. That's where you're having kōrero with family, looking at emails, all of that sort of stuff. And an EC12, EC13 form is required, but the primary caregiver can complete it. Now, another pānui that followed subsequently in August, which I don't believe is published, is the one from the 11th of August. So here it is here. On the 11th of August in the evening, the ministry issued this pānui to advise that from the 11th of August, primary caregivers were not required to complete the EC13 form no longer. So you didn't actually need any paperwork for the EC13. So given the ongoing challenges in the sector, for example, they have actually said that if you are in a lower funding band than you were advanced at, they were going to honour the funding band that you were advanced at. So for example, if your funding for June to September was advanced at the 80 to 99% funding band, and for this funding period, you dropped down to the 50 to 79. The ministry is stating here that they will honour the 80 to 99% funding band for that period. For the absence exemptions, we're temporarily removing the requirement for the EC12, EC13 form to be completed when applying the absence exemption. So from the 11th of August, you no longer needed to get parents or primary caregivers to complete the EC12, EC13 forms to enable you to exempt the child if they're absent due to one of those reasons. So let's look at how to apply the exemption. Obviously, this is things that you need to do prior to submitting your RS7. We're just going to come to children, and I'm just going to pretend that Bronwyn, for example, was absent in June, and I've got the EC12 completed, I've got the EC13 form completed by the primary caregiver to say that there was a 2-week period in June where the child was absent because of one of the 4 criteria as set out by the ministry. Thank you for your patience as I navigate between the information that I want. Great, so we're going to see that this child was absent for a 2-week period, for example. So what we would do is we would come to timetable, we would click add. What we would do is select from when the period is going to begin. We can type in the date or select it from the calendar here. I'm going to say it was from the 6th of June, for example. Putting the child onto special needs because I've got the EC13 completed by the parent, and now I'm just going to click update. You'll notice that there are sign-in sheets which may be incorrect after this change. They are, because those sign-in sheets have already been modified, and that was when the child didn't have an exemption applied. So we need to update our sign-in sheets. Like I mentioned earlier, we're just going to say that this exemption period was for 2 weeks. So what we need to do is stop the exemption from when that exemption no longer applies. So let's select 24th of June, for example. Remove the special needs selection and update. So what that means is that once you've put in an exemption for a period that has passed, you need to remodify the sign-in sheet for that period to pick up the exemption. So when we come to our sign-in sheet, and we come from the 6th of June and click search, all we need to do is just basically open the sign-in sheet. When you're opening the sign-in sheet, InfoCare is doing 3 checks. Check 1, does the child have 20 hours ECE on their timetable? If they do now, where they subsequently didn't, it will apply the 20 hours ECE. The second check it's doing is to see if that child is now eligible for an exemption from the absence rules. This is our case where the child is eligible. Step 3 is that it's actually checking the centre calendar to see if there's an exemption applied in the centre calendar for the whole service, the likes of your EC12s. And previously, when we actually had the EC12 service open with attendances, etc. Just a little tip, click anywhere on the screen and then you can click click end on your keyboard and it takes you down. It just sort of saves you from scrolling. And you would do this through your sign-in sheet up to current. Perfect. So I'm just going to stop there because you don't need to see me going through all the way to September. But in summary, if you're applying an EC12, EC13 exemption for a previous period, what you need to do is remodify the sign-in sheet to pick up that exemption. So if I come to the children again, and if I select my child, is this the one I did it for? No. Wrong one. Yep, so this is the one I did it for. Now when I come to history, what we can do is have a look at the history for that period. And when we go print options, you can see that we've got special needs here. If you don't have the special needs column and you want it, you can simply click on the print option and select it from down the bottom there. That way you can see that the special needs exemption has been applied to that child. And as you can see, I didn't continue through the rest of the period, so it hasn't been applied to the sign-in sheet. Right, so the other area that the ministry changed for the likes of this 1 June to 30th of September period was the allocation of the 80 discretionary hours instead of the usual 40 discretionary hours. So that's what you can use to support your funding band. Some people have sort of said, well, why should I use discretionary hours when I'm going to be funded at that rate anyway? From an industry leader, they've suggested that you do use your discretionary hours so that they can actually be seen that they are actually needed to be used. So if they've got a whole heap of services that haven't used any discretionary hours for the funding period, it would raise the question, are discretionary hours actually needed? So if we want to look at how we use discretionary hours when we come to our start items and when we come to timesheets, where you've got the example of a registered teacher absent and an unregistered reliever in their place, let's just come here to click our change times and let's make it that this registered person was absent. We just click change times, record them as being absent. To use discretionary hours, you click change time for the non-registered staff member. And then within the worked column is where you would select substitute, for example. Substitute is where you're substituting a non-registered employee as registered just for the purposes of funding. Now, remembering to use substitute only for the hours that they're actually required to meet ratio, and you can turn the use of substitute hours off by selecting contact or under twos or over twos, whatever you use within your service. So we can see there that we've got some discretionary hours used.